Give us this day our daily bread. I know you recognize those words. They're from the Lord's Prayer, where Jesus taught us to ask for our daily bread. Now, when he mentioned that, I'm sure he had in mind the whole meal and all the rest of our daily necessities. That one line captures the idea of asking God to provide what you need each day. But the way he phrased it reminds us that bread is one of the most basic needs that we have. We call it a staple of life. I mean, we love our meat and potatoes and everything else that we eat, but bread is that essential thing that has been used for ages to keep people going. You can go back to the Garden of Eden. That's the first reference to a loaf of bread. In Genesis 3:19, God said to Adam, "By the sweat of your brow, from now on you'll be eating your bread." You get into the wilderness with the Israelites as Moses led them for 40 years. And every day, God is dropping down that manna. Exodus calls it the bread from heaven. Psalm 78, using poetic language, says, "Oh, it's the bread of angels because it came from above." Yes, bread supplied every day for those Israelites in the wilderness. And of course, Jesus then taught us that famous line in the prayer, to give us our daily bread. Bread's an important thing. So why do I mention that to you today? Because we're going to be talking about bread today, at least bread of a sort, as we go back to our study of the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, we've been in Ecclesiastes all month long. This book from King Solomon, where he gives us words of wisdom, how to live life and live it right. Ecclesiastes isn't famous for high, lofty theological ideas. This is not the book of Romans. It's not any of these great prophecy books that lay out grand schemes. No, it's a practical book where Solomon gives you words of wisdom on how to live life and live it the right way before God. Now, in these practical exhortations, sometimes he's telling you what to do, what not to do. In today's passage, he's telling us about how to think. He's developing an attitude in our minds of how we will approach life. And I want to share that with you today as we take a look at our text. We're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 11. We're going to be looking at verse 1. King Solomon says in verse 1, "Cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days you'll find it again." Now, perhaps you recognize those words because they often get used today. You'll find them, for example, on greeting cards or sometimes on stationery, sometimes on posters that are there for encouragement, positive affirmation thinking. You'll find this phrase, "Cast your bread upon the water." Boy, it sounds great. It encourages you to go out there and do something. Now, here's the problem, though. What exactly does that mean? I mean, when those who interpret the Bible go back and try to find out what was Solomon saying, where did he get that from? What does it mean? There are some issues. Because why would anybody take a good loaf of bread and throw it out on water? Now, today we might do that if we're feeding the ducks. Got our children, our grandchildren, and we're giving some bread so they can feed the ducks or feeding the turtles or the goldfish in the goldfish pond. Yeah, we'll do that for fun. Not sure back in ancient times, in the Old Testament days, if they did such things. But it's not really what Solomon's talking about. And so we try to figure out, so under what circumstances would they take bread and throw it on water? And here's where the Bible doesn't tell us. Historical records that we've discovered, they don't say anything about it either, and archaeologists haven't found it. It's one of those mysteries, exactly where this phrase came from, why Solomon used it, and what's it supposed to mean. Now, you might think, okay, why don't we just pass on this and go get us another verse? No, it's here. And it's in a context that helps us figure out what it means. And I think we can. I want to show you what he's talking about. First, let's take that bread once again. Now, if we follow and track with bread throughout the Scriptures, give us this day our daily bread. Bread represents something of value. I mean, we need that. We want it. Because if we go without our daily bread, we go hungry. It's something of value. Now, Solomon encourages us to take something of value and toss it away. Toss it on the water. He's putting a challenge in front of you. Are you willing to cast your bread on the water and then wait and see if it comes back to you? Let me put that to you a different way. Are you willing to take a chance? To do something that has a certain amount of risk to it? Odds are it'll come back in your favor. It might fail, though, because sometimes it does. So knowing that it could fail, but it could succeed, Are you willing to take a chance and try something? Are you willing to cast your bread out on the water and then wait and see if it returns to you once again? Now, the imagery he's using here is the imagery of the seashore. Oh, we love the seashore. We get out there ourselves, and we'll go to the beach, and we'll lay out on the beach and sun and get in the waves and play. I doubt in biblical times they did much of that. There's no records of that. But everybody in Israel did know about the shore because, you see, Israel is not very far from the Mediterranean Sea. They knew about the sea, and they knew how it operated. And you know how it operates? Same thing today. Oftentimes those waters, as the tide comes in, the tide goes out, the waves come, the waves go. Sometimes they will snag something and they pull it out to sea. I grew up on the beach in Florida, saw this many times, where a tourist isn't paying attention. Next thing you know, there's a beach ball, an air mattress, or something else, and the waves have caught it and dragging it out. Now, you only want to pursue it so far. It gets dangerous after that. And we'd watch that thing sometimes as it would fade away, off into the sea. Oh, it doesn't stay there forever, because eventually the waves will bring it back in and it's back up on shore. If you're a beachcomber going out every morning, you'll find all types of stuff that's on the beach washed in overnight. Solomon is picking up on that imagery. You throw something out there, it's going to come back eventually. Now, 100% all the time? No, it doesn't always come back, but a lot of it does. So are you willing to take that chance to cast your bread out there and then wait and see if it comes back and if your plans succeed? That's what he's encouraging you to do. He's encouraging you to cast your bread, to take a chance. And to put it in a strong way, don't be afraid to take a chance and try something. One of the things that holds us back sometimes is the fear of failure, the fear of loss, the risk that you're facing. And you say sometimes, you know what, the reason I'm not going to do that because it might go wrong, and so I'm going to back off of it. Now, if you're going to try to avoid risk, you're going to have a hard time doing that. Good luck trying to avoid all the risks that are there in life, because life is filled with risk. About everything you do has some kind of risk of failure, risk of harm, risk of some kind of trouble. He has an interesting passage that he gives us in Ecclesiastes where he describes what ordinary life can be like and the risk that are involved. Here's what he says. So if you're going to go out there and you're planning on doing your work, maybe you're digging a pit in the ground. You need it for a construction, something you're building, and you're digging that hole. He says you do know that sometimes a person digging a hole will fall into it accidentally, just trip and stumble and fall into it. So maybe we better not dig any holes, right? No, we dig anyway, knowing, yeah, there's a risk, but most of the time that doesn't happen. I'm going to dig my pit. Or I'm chopping wood. And he says, you know, when you're chopping wood, that sometimes, ever so often, something goes wrong. The axe misses. Or you got a piece of wood that flies up and hits you. Yeah, that happens ever so often. But most of the time, chopping wood goes fine. You see, whatever you do, you go to work and work your job. There's always the risk that you could get hurt. Usually, though, that doesn't keep us from doing our jobs. We go and we take the risk. So, for example, you hear about a plane crash. You know, sometimes when a person hears about a plane crash, they just swear off planes. I'm not flying anymore. It's too risky. Statistically, that's not the case. More often than not, they fly safely. And sometimes we just simply say, I know there's a risk, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to fly because the odds are in my favor. If you swear off flying, you know, you could say, I'm just going to drive from now on. But driving a car, accidents happen every day, and people get injured and killed. And still, most of us say, that's fine, but I'll take my chances. It's a reasonable risk. I'm going to drive my car. Suppose you decide, you know what, I'm done with all of that. No flying, no cars. It's too risky. I'm just going to stay at home. But, folks, you could be walking across the grass barefoot and still step on something and get hurt. So you tell yourself, you know what, I got to play it safe. I'm getting inside my house. I'm closing the doors. I'll be safe inside my castle. Nothing can hurt me in here. In Amos chapter 5, Amos has an interesting picture of the person who's trying to run away from danger. He says there's a man, he's out walking the streets. He runs into a lion. Man, he runs as fast as he can. He gets away from the lion but runs into a bear. He turns from that bear. He runs home, gets in home, shuts the door, and he's now safe. He leans up against the wall to catch his breath, and a snake bites him. And how'd that snake get in here? However they get in. In their days, it's those clay walls that they had. All types of critters, snakes and scorpions, they might burrow in. At some point, you might get hurt, even inside your home. Not uncommon today, ever so often you hear a story. Somebody finds a snake. Maybe it's in a closet, maybe it's in a kitchen. It's not supposed to be there, but they find their way in. You see, if you thought, boy, I'm safe, I'm at home now, nothing can touch me, they can still touch you. Fact is, in a typical home, you could be walking and trip and hurt yourself. Well, that happens all the time. Or it could be that you're eating and you get choked on food. That happens. You know what? You can't even open an envelope to see if you won the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstake without the possibility of a paper cut. And if you say, oh, that's all right, I'd use an envelope opener, be careful with that point on the end. That sometimes sticks. Life is filled with risk. And about anything you do has a certain level of risk to it. There's no avoiding that. You know what Solomon's saying? Don't be afraid of risk. Don't be afraid of taking a chance where it might go wrong. That's how life is. Life sometimes goes wrong. But go ahead and take your bread and cast your bread. It'll come back. Oh, well, maybe not. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it does. Cast your bread anyway and give it a chance. That's a good principle for life. Don't let the fear of something going wrong keep you from doing something good. You need to memorize that. Don't let the fear that it might go wrong keep you from doing the thing that you really want to do, that you ought to do. Yeah, we don't want to be afraid of the risks that are out there, because they're always out there. That's just the way life works. Now, when you think about that, that takes us back then to getting on the plane, driving in the car, going to the beach, since Solomon brought the subject up for us, and swimming in the ocean. You could run into a shark or a stingray, but jellyfish, most of the time we don't. You could lay on the beach and still have something bite you, but most of the time it doesn't. We don't shy away from things in life just because we're afraid of the risk. That's what he wants us to remember. Hey, remember that some other things in life too. Most of you've had pets, and you know what it's like to grieve for a pet when they die. Oh, that's one of the saddest moments of my life is when you lose a pet. And you know, sometimes when we're in that grief, you know what we'll say? I don't think I can do this again. I'd love to have another dog, another cat, enjoy the years together, but I just have a hard time at the end when they die. I don't think I can go through that again. Yeah, I get that. But you know what Solomon would say? Don't let your fear of the thing that goes wrong at the end keep you from enjoying all the many years that you could enjoy. And most of us, we know that. Maybe a broken relationship affects you that way. Sometimes people have that. A relationship breaks up, it's tragic, it hurts, it just brings you down. And you may tell yourself, you know what, I don't think I'll do that again. I've loved and lost once, I'm not going to love again, because more often not, they're going to break your heart. No, most of the time they don't. And whether they do or don't, you don't yet know. Solomon would say, cast your bread on the water and let's see what happens. Don't let the fear of something going wrong keep you from doing something good. I think about the season we've come through, this COVID season. Boy, we took all types of precautions. We played it safe. We sheltered in place. We wore masks. We stayed away from people with our social distance, no handshakes, no hugs. We did a lot of things. And now as we look back, we'll second guess all of that. For all I know, we probably did the right thing at the time. We did what we knew. And if another pandemic comes, we might do it again just the same way, or we might not. Because what we learned was that we don't want to live like that forever. You may have to do it temporarily, but we don't want to be isolated from people like that forever and ever. And that's why little by little we started to decide how much risk are we willing to take as we ventured out into the community and around people. As we decided whether or not we're comfortable now shaking hands and giving a hug and all those things. You see, that's how life is lived. Playing it safe is nice for a while, but you don't want to do it forever. You know, there's an old expression that I think captures this idea well. A ship in a harbor is safe, but that's not what ships were built for. At some point, that ship's got to venture out and take risk. Otherwise, it's not living up to its purpose. And you and I have to venture out into this world and take risk. And Solomon says, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get out there and try something, to do something, just because you know that it might go wrong. So he wants us to get out there and take a chance, but he would also tell you, and do it smart. Remember, this is the wisdom guy. This is the guy that has that inspired wisdom telling us how to be smart and make good choices. And he says, same is true for risk. That is, if there is a bad risk, don't do that. He has in the book of Proverbs a proverb that says that when there's an obvious danger in front of you, a smart person will back off. The simple-minded fool just keeps going and gets in trouble. Yeah, when you've got a bad risk, back off of it. Now, at the same time as you're taking the risks that are reasonable, acceptable risk, even then Solomon has some advice for us there. For one thing, he wants you to think before you do. He's got an interesting proverb, and it's right in the chapter preceding our text today. It's in chapter 10 of Ecclesiastes. This is where he says, hey, listen, you're getting ready to chop some wood? You got a dull axe, you're going to be working harder and harder and harder with a dull axe. Hey, sharpen the dull axe, and then you'll have success when you're chopping that wood. Put it to you a different way. Before you do something, first, do some careful planning and preparation. You want to increase the odds of success and minimize the risk? Think about it first. Plan, prepare, and get ready, and then the odds are you'll have a success versus going in there, flying off the cuff, just, hoping it works. No. Do some preparation planning first. Solomon has all types of proverbs that talk about the wise man. He checks his steps before he makes those steps, and a whole host of other good advice. That's good advice for you as well. So whatever you're about to do, why don't you find out what you're getting yourself into? Why don't you listen to instructions? Why don't you ask questions? Why don't you read the manual? Why don't you pay attention, and maybe you'll go in and have success. So he does want us to take risks, but to take smart risks. We're thinking, we're preparing, we're planning. He also has another bit of advice when it comes to taking your risk and minimizing the risk, increasing your odds. It's in verse 2 of chapter 11 of Ecclesiastes. He says, take your portion, whatever it is, split it up into 7. Oh, make that 8. He says, because you never know what misfortune might befall you. Now, what he's talking about there is a principle all of us know. It's called diversifying what you have. Diversifying, or we like to say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You've heard that expression? That's an old one. Goes back to 1615 to the novel Don Quixote. Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because if you drop that one basket, you lose everything. Put them in separate baskets. That way, if you lose one basket, the others are still secure. Solomon's all about that. As you're stepping out in life, doing things, there's a risk involved. Diversify. Like, for example, investments are always done that way if you're doing it smart. Don't take all of your investments in one thing, because that one thing crashes, boy, you take a big loss. You diversify. That's what Solomon has in mind. And when you're going after a goal, you want to try to achieve something, there may be more than one way to get there. Start off with the best way, but always have the backup of another thing to try and another thing to try, so that hopefully one of them will succeed. Actually, he says that in this chapter 11. He goes on to say that a person sows the seed in the morning, and I sowed enough, I think I've got enough to take care of me and my family. You know what Solomon said? Why don't you go out in the evening and sow some more as well? Well, I don't need it, because if this works, he says, what if that doesn't work? Sow in the morning and sow in the evening. If they both work, that's great. But if one fails, you still have the other one to fall back on. That's diversifying. That's just taking risk and playing it smart. Oh, he encourages you to do timely action. To when the opportunity comes, grab that opportunity. He's got this most interesting proverb when he talks about the snake charmer. He says, if a snake bites before it's charmed, the snake charmer doesn't get paid. Now, if you don't know how snake charmers worked back in ancient time, you've seen the pictures of the modern day guys in India blowing the flute and charming that snake. They had something roughly the equivalent of that back in biblical times. I don't know so much it was charming for a show, it was getting rid of a pest, equivalent of our modern day pest control. Get this thing out of my house. If you ever have had a critter up in your attic or in the walls and you hire somebody to come get rid of the thing. Now, here's the deal. With a snake, if there's a snake in the house and you don't want to get bit, and the guy says, I'll be there, I want him here before he bites me. Once he bites me, I don't need you now. Damage is already done. Or the critter leaves, I don't need you now because the critter's gone. Yes, you don't get paid unless you show up in a timely manner and do the job you were asked to do. Solomon is saying that to you as well. You want to cast your bread on the water and hope it comes to success? Then think and plan and diversify and act in a timely manner. Don't procrastinate and miss a good opportunity. He says, for example, the smart man will get out there when it's time to harvest, and he'll harvest. It's the fool that says, well, I don't feel like it today, I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow may not work at all. You may have missed your opportunity. I like another proverb he says in the book of Proverbs, where in chapter 14 he says, you can talk about something all you want, but talking doesn't get it done. There comes a time to stop talking and start doing. And that's what you do if you want to have success. Well, those are just little nuggets of wisdom he gives us as he encourages us. Don't be afraid to take a chance. Don't be afraid that there's a risk involved. Sure there is. And if it's too much, then pass on it. But otherwise, life is filled with risk. Plan well, prepare yourself, get out there and do it in a timely manner, and trust that the Lord will grant you success. Which brings me to one last thought I want to take from this idea that Solomon's given us. I want to give you just a personal word of encouragement challenge, and that is try something new. Stretch yourself and let yourself grow. That's how it works in life. If we ever want to grow and become something more than we are, we got to actually step out and try something we've not tried before. And in doing so, take a risk. We might fail, but go ahead and take that risk, because in stretching yourself, you grow and become something more than what you were. Do you have a bucket list? You hear people talk about that. All these things I want to do someday before I die. A bucket list typically is all these things I haven't yet done, but I would like to try it sometime. I would like to do it. I think in all of our lives there's things we haven't done, and maybe sometimes we think about it, but we're afraid because I'm not sure I can do it. I might fail in doing it. I might not do as good a job as I need to do. Solomon would encourage you to go ahead and cast your bread on the water. Go ahead and give it a try. Prepare yourself and get ready so you come at it with your best, but go ahead and give it a try. You never know what you can do until you try. With that in mind, I got to encourage you to think about what goes on here at First Church. We've got all types of things that we do that require volunteers, helping us, whether it be in the children or the youth, or working with our adults, whether it be working in teaching in a class or chaperoning and shepherding, or food and hosting and greeting and all these things. A lot of jobs. We need people to step up and take some of these jobs. And if you're not doing anything, I want you to talk to me or someone else here and say, so what could I do? I'd like to do something, because we've got a lot of somethings to be done. Now, you may say, but I'm not sure I can. I don't know if I know how. I might fail. That's right, you might. And you might not. That's the cast the bread idea. Go ahead and put it out there, and let's see if it comes back with success or not. But you'll never know until you try. And don't be afraid to fail. Failing is what everybody does. All the great inventors first failed many times, but kept trying and trying until they finally got it right. And that's how we learn anything in life. Back in the days of school, how'd we learn? Because you try, and you don't do as well as you would hope, but you come back and you try it again until it gets better. That's how life works. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid that you may miss on that first or second or even third try, but keep coming back and see if you can get it right. Nothing ventured, nothing gains, the old expression, and that's really what Solomon was teaching us in this text, as he encouraged us to take that which is of value, that I really don't want to lose it. I got my daily bread, but I'm willing to cast the bread and let the tide take it out, knowing it's going to bring it back. Well, maybe it'll bring it back. It doesn't always bring it back. There's a risk involved, but you know what? I'm willing to take that risk. I'm going to take a chance because I think the odds are good. They're in my favor. I'm going to cast my bread. I'm going to take a chance, and I'm going to trust the Lord because He's always looking out for His people. And folks, when we can think like that as we live our lives, I think great things can happen. The Lord will bless us for those of us who have the faith to cast our bread upon the water. Father, we thank you for these words of encouragement, a challenge for us to step a little bit out of our comfort zone at times, to get out there and try things and do things and believe that you will bless your people. We thank you, Father, for this word, and we thank you for all the blessings you've given us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.